let me introduce to you the 137th member of the Country Music Hall of Fame. He will be inducted officially on October 20th. Great hit maker, great funny man, humanitarian, Ray Stevens. Here he comes, boogity boogity.
Thank you.
So we're gonna sit down and talk to each other, but y'all can listen. Does that sound like a plan? Here we go. All right?
Yeah. This is one of those chairs like they used to have on the Tonight Show. Before they figured out you got to put a board under there or people keep falling back. You know?
Yeah, especially Ed McMahon. Yeah. Ray, a big part of the Country Music Association's initiative with CMA Music Fest involves music education and getting instruments to kids in school and instruction. How important was music education for you growing up in Georgia?
Well, you know, I kind of bypassed that because in those times, you either gravitated toward music naturally or not. And I always loved music from the time I was born, I guess. And so music education was just something that was offered to me because everybody knew I was going to be in the music business. I don't know, they knew it before I did. But I think it's important, even though I didn't, it wasn't a big deal back then, you know.
Well, you did play in the high school band, though,
oh yeah.
I believe you were trying to figure out what instrument to play, and your band director just said, "Hey, play all of them."
Well, I got in the band just so I could get close to the majorettes, you know. That was my main motive. But I started out playing the clarinet. And boy, back then it wasn't that hard. But I tried to play one the other day. I can't even hold it anymore. It's just one of those things. I gravitated from that to the trumpet, and then I even played the tuba at one point. And I played the drums until we had to march one day. And the drum almost beat my leg off, so I stopped playing the drums.
Now, you're from a town called Clarkdale, Georgia.
Yeah, I was named after Mr. Clark, who had a thread company. It was a cotton mill town. And Clarkdale was just a little village, and everybody that lived there worked in the mill, cotton mill. And I lived there till I was 10, and then my family was transferred down south to Albany, Georgia. And when we got down there, we found out the pronunciation was Albany. So I lived there until I was 17 and then moved back to Atlanta.
Now, at the mill, it wasn't just mill work. I mean, I know it was every day, but also they had a ball team at the mill, as I understand.
Yeah.
Your dad was as good on the baseball diamond as he was in the mill.
Yeah, that's the reason they hired him to work in the mill, because he could play baseball. And he was a third baseman. And he was pretty good, but of course it was still just an amateur club. It was, back in those days, all the mills in the South had ball teams. And it was sort of a thing, I guess they used it to build, you know, what's the word I'm looking for, confidence or
some loyalty among
loyalty, yeah, and it was just a fun thing. You know, when I was a kid, I remember going to all the ball games.
A lot of factories, even outside of the South, did that. I know Charlie Pride got a gig at a smelting plant up in Montana and played baseball for them. That baseball was a part of the fabric of life, even at this mill where they made fabric. Now, you're known as a piano player. You're known for many things, but was your first instrument piano?
Yeah, it really was. My mother wanted me to take piano lessons, and of course I wanted to go out and play baseball with the other guys on the hill that the mill was built on. It was a big grassy area. But she insisted, so my dad sprung for a $60 used upright piano, and I took piano lessons.
Was it easy for you from the start? Did you have a knack for it?
It wasn't super hard, but it was totally foreign, and so I had a few lessons though, and I remember one day, a year or so after I started taking lessons, something clicked in my head, and I thought, well, now wait a minute, I understand this. And from then on, I could just play anything I wanted to play.
It is like a language. There's a fluency that you develop. If you're learning a foreign language, that's an experience that a lot of people have, where just a year or two into it, all of a sudden they can think that way, and you started to think piano.
I did, and I don't know why. I mean, that's something I'll never understand, but it was like overnight. I get this. And so a lot of things are like that with a lot of people, you know.
When did you move to Atlanta, Georgia, and how was that important for your development?
Well, I said that I was born and raised in Clarkdale, but that was only 25 miles northwest of Atlanta. And then we moved to Albany and moved back to Atlanta proper. And that was important to me because I met a guy named Bill Lowry, and he was a music publisher, and he encouraged me to write songs. And I said, well, boy, okay, let's do that. And I wrote a song. The first song I wrote, took to him. He liked it. And on the strength of that song, he was able to get me a recording contract with Capitol Records.
And you were how old when you did this?
I was 17, still in high school. And I thought, boy, this is easy, you know. 3 years later, I'm still trying to get a hit record. And this was 57 when I made the first record at 17. So 3 years later, I thought, I better do something really strange and different, attract some attention, get the ball rolling here. So I wrote a song called Sergeant Preston of the Yukon, and it featured a dog. Do you folks remember Sergeant Preston of the Yukon? Any of you? Hold up your hands if you do. That's pretty good, not very good, but well, that was a long time ago. But he was a red coat, he was a Canadian Mountie, and he had a dog named King. And I wrote this song, and the hook of the song was King barking, and that was my doing something a little different to attract attention. Well, sure enough, it did. And radio stations started to play the record, and it was taking off. It was going to be a pretty big hit record. And then the people that owned the character Sergeant Preston decided that I hadn't gotten permission from them to use him in a song. And so they sent a letter, and I had to pull the record off the market. And that broke my heart to kill a hit record like that, but it gave me a clue. I knew what to do. So in '61, I wrote a song called Jeremiah Peabody's Polyunsaturated, Quick Dissolving, Fast Acting, Pleasant Tasting Green and Purple Pills. Still one of the longest song titles out there, and it was a small hit. Needless to say, a comedy song, just like Sergeant Preston.
That song has more words in the title than most hit country songs today have words in the entire song.
Well, I don't know about that, but it was
today you just got to say, country girl, shake it for me, girl, shake it for me, girl, shake it for me, and you just repeat. But that's a mouthful right there.
Well, yeah, especially if you say shake it for somebody else too.
Well, there you go. So what you're trying, you've got the dog bark song.
Yeah.
You've got the song with the title that I don't dare try to replicate without any kind of cheat sheet in front of me. And it seems like you're trying to do something that our friend Don Light called separation from the pack. You were trying to be something different early on.
Well, I had tried to record songs like everybody else had recorded from 1957 to 1960. And I wasn't having any success, so I figured I better cut myself from the pack just to see if I could make something happen. And sure enough, it worked.
When did you move to Nashville?
January 2nd, 1962. And 3 weeks after I moved here, I wrote and recorded Ahab the Arab, which was my first big hit record in '62.
That was a busy day for you. You not only recorded that song, but you were working as a session musician, which is somebody who's playing, in your case, various instruments on other people's recording sessions.
Yeah.
What else happened the same day that you cut Ahab?
Well, I worked for Mercury, Shelby Singleton. He was in charge of record production here in Nashville for Mercury Records, and he had hired Jerry Kennedy from the get-go to, help him produce the records, because Shelby wasn't a musician, and of course everybody knows Jerry Kennedy was a great guitar player and still is, and he hired me to assist in that effort also, and I was playing on a lot of sessions when I moved up here, and the day that I cut Ahab the Arab, I cut it that morning at 10 o'clock, and then at 2 we cut Leroy Van Dyke singing Walk On By, which was another big hit record, and that night at 6 we cut Joe Dowell singing Wooden Heart, which was another big hit. So we cut 3 hit records in one day, and I thought that was pretty good.
That's amazing. And was your focus then always on becoming a star artist, or were you thinking you could fall in and be a session player?
When I first moved here, I thought, well, maybe I'll get lucky and get some hits and be a star, an artist. But my main thing was to be a sideman, a session musician. Because when I met all the other guys that worked sessions, great guys and great musicians and girls too. And we were like a big family, and I just had so much fun, and I learned so much from all these other session musicians. And of course, 3 weeks in, I cut Ahab the Arab, and that kind of cut me away from the session musician gig temporarily. But the record didn't come out until it was spring or early summer of that year, so I still had a lot of time between January 20th, when we cut the song, and when it was actually released and became a hit.
You also, in working on these sessions, you often were an arranger doing string arrangements, like on Bobby Bare's great hit
Streets of
Baltimore.
Yeah.
And you were playing much more than piano, right? You were kind of a whatever's in the car, I'll pull it out and play it.
Yeah, Charlie McCoy was another great musician here in Nashville, and of course Charlie's main instrument is harmonica, but he also had a lot of instruments in the trunk of his car also. And I remember we were doing an Elvis session one time, and the song called for twin trumpets, sort of like Herb Alpert. So Charlie and I went out to our cars and got our trumpets, and it was cold, and the trumpets were cold. We had to warm them up, but we played the twin trumpets on Elvis's, I forget what the name of the song was. It was, I think it was for his movie Fun in Acapulco or something like that. And that was a lot of fun.
Was Elvis in the studio at the time?
Yeah, sure.
Man. Was session, you have kept up, you've owned studios for many years, and you continue to work in the studio. How was recording records, making music in the studio, different in the early 60s from what it is today?
Well, the equipment has changed so much. The technology has advanced so much. And back in the old days, I mean, you go back and look at a picture of those old mixing boards, and it looks like it was made by Mattel. It looks like a toy. Today, the equipment is just unbelievable. And of course, today we record everything, for the most part, digitally. Back then, it was all analog. There was no such thing as digital. And but it's still, the sound back then was still good. I mean, I remember Harold Bradley, Owen's brother, told me that when Nashville first started as a recording center, Owen built, I think, the first studio here with echo. There were other studios here, but they didn't have real echo. And Owen built a studio with a room that was plastered, and no walls were parallel, and made a real echo chamber, And that's what got the big labels to start sending all their artists to Nashville to record in what's now called the Quonset Hut down on 16th Avenue South. Back in those days, we called it Bradley's. And that's where I could have the Arab, as a matter of fact, and a lot of other things.
And you would actually get on the studio floor with other musicians and play at the same time while somebody sang? Is that?
Sure, yeah.
That's not how things are done these days, generally.
No, as a matter of fact, on Ahab the Arab, I played the piano and sang it at the same time.
Wow. Did you worry as you started to have some, what could be termed novelty hits, that you would be tagged that way, that you would be thought of as just the funny guy? And
I should have worried, but I didn't. You know, and I thought, well, I can just do anything I want to do. I mean, you know. So in I think it was 69, I cut a song called Mr. Businessman, which was a pop song. It was a straight song, wasn't a comedy song, and it was a hit. And of course, I had a relapse right after that and cut guitars in. But my thought was, cut the best song you got. Who cares what category it's in? Just cut the best song you've got. And that's what I did.
Which didn't always serve you. You were the first to cut a song that we now think of as an absolute classic, Sunday Morning Coming Down, that Chris Christopherson wrote.
Yeah.
You recognized that song as a genius piece of work.
It was.
And went and recorded it, and you weren't really rewarded for that decision.
Well, Johnny Cash cut it after I did, 6 months or a year later, and he had a big hit with it. But I cut it with the big orchestra, strings, horns, everything, big background vocal. And for some reason, I think the people out there in radio land just didn't picture Ray Stevens as a guy who gets up on Sunday morning stoned, which is what the song was about. And so I didn't sell any, but I sold a few. But Cash, they didn't believe that about him, I guess, so he got away with it. But I remember when that song was pitched to me, my friend Bob Beckham ran the publishing company that published all Christopherson's songs. And he said, I got a new writer here, Chris Christopherson, and he just brought me 3 songs. You can come listen, you can cut any of them you want to. And so I went over, he played me Sunday Morning Coming Down, he played me Help Me Make It Through the Night, and he played me For the Good Times. And so I picked Sunday Morning Coming Down.
And here we are, nearly 50 years later, and Johnny Cash is still trying to hone in on our show. I can hear they're playing
is that
I Walk the Line in the background there. Yeah. How did you come to write your first Grammy-winning song and not a novelty song, Everything is Beautiful? Y'all remember Everything is Beautiful?
Yeah, okay. I was signed, I had just left Monument, where I had recorded guitars in, and Mr. Businessman. And I had signed with a record company called Barnaby, which was Andy Williams' record company. And the reason I did that is because I was being managed by Andy's brother, Don Williams. Not Don Williams, the country singer, but Don Williams, Andy Williams' brother. And the reason I was signed with Don as a manager, Roger Miller was managed by Don Williams also. And Roger said to Don, you need to manage Ray Stevens. So Don called me and said, you want a manager? And I said, I don't know, I might need a manager. He says, I'm coming to town, let's have lunch. And so he came in and we had lunch and I signed with him. Make a long story short, or a short story long, because of my association with Don, Andy's brother, I was chosen to host the Andy Williams Summer Show on NBC television. And I wanted to write a song that could be used as a theme song for that television show. And so I just chained myself to the piano and would not stop trying until I wrote something that I thought was worthy. And sure enough, it was Everything is Beautiful.
You actually, I'm told the story is that you had a music room in your basement and you instructed your daughters and wife not to bother you, and if you demanded to be let out of the music room, they were not to let you out.
Sort of like that scene in Young Frankenstein, right? Yeah, but you know, I of course came out for food, but I was in there 3 days, and I just wouldn't take no for an answer. I kept getting ideas and writing a few words, and then that's not it. And I finally hit on Everything is Beautiful.
When did you realize that that song was going to be a huge hit?
The minute I wrote it, I knew it was a hit. I don't know how, but I mean, you know. And funny thing, the little children on the front singing "Jesus Loves the Little Children," which set up the song. I didn't get that idea until we had the record made. And I said to Charlie Talent, my engineer in the studio where we had just finished recording it, I said, you know, I think this needs little kids on the front singing. So we took a portable recorder to a school here in town and recorded the second grade class singing "Jesus Loves the Little Children." Took it back to the studio. The quality was good enough, and we spliced it onto the front of the record that we'd already made, and it worked like a charm. So, a little interesting bit of.
Any kids in that choir special to you?
Well, the reason I chose the school is because my daughters went there, so they were in the choir also.
I don't even know if you know this, but another member of the choir was Regina McCrary, who is now a part of the McCrary Sisters, incredible gospel group, and she sang with Bob Dylan on the road for years. So she was. You gave her professional start.
Well, see there.
As well. I guess maybe not professional. I doubt you paid those kids, did you?
Oh no, I think not much though.
Getting the Grammy Award for that, what did that mean to you in terms of affirmation that your career was on the right track?
Well, it was a huge boost. I couldn't accept the award. I was in Australia. Don Williams, my brilliant manager, had booked me in Sydney, and I was over there when I won the award. And Glenn Campbell picked up my award for me, and I got to get that back from him. Or his estate, by the way. Just kidding, I'm sorry. But it was a giant honor. It was a lot of fun winning that.
Who were your heroes in Nashville? Who were the people that you really looked up to? Were they other musicians? Were they record label executives?
All of the above. I was a big fan of course, Chet Atkins, guitar player, producer for RCA. Owen Bradley, a big fan of the Jordanaires. Gordon Stoker, the leader of the Jordanaires, was super nice to me.
Jordanaires were the backing, the vocal group that backed so many hits of Elvis Presley and really
everybody
hundreds
else.
And hundreds of others.
Oh gosh, yeah. You know, just so many great musicians. Bill Justice was one of my hero friends, and what a great musician he was. As a matter of fact, he was such a good musician. He scored movies, and in '69 he's in Hollywood scoring a movie, and I happened to be out there for some reason. I forget now what, but he heard I was in town. He called me and said, "Hey man, what's happening?" That's the way he talked. And I said, "Hey Bill," he said, "where you staying?" I told him. He said, "I'll be right over." So he came over to the hotel. We're having breakfast in the coffee shop, and he says, "I got a song title for you." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "Guitar Sand, man." So I wrote the song, but I got the title from Bill Justice.
You have written before that that there are people who tell funny jokes, and then there are people who tell jokes funny. You're somebody who seems to be able to make people laugh at will. Has it always been that way for you? Is that a natural thing?
Well, I've always loved comedy. I've always loved humor, and I'm a big fan of a joke that'll bring a laugh. And you know, I've worked with comedians all my life. I used to work Vegas with people like Don Rickles and Bob Newhart and of Shecky Green and people like that. And I would always stand backstage and listen to their act, you know. And so I picked up a lot of pointers about how to deliver a joke. And I just enjoy humor, period.